Alright, so in the first video, brief review, if you didn't check it out, I advise you check it out because it will make this video make sense. It basically was about don't fight the rich man's war. Civil War is about that. I think to a certain extent the American Revolution was about it. Even at World War II, you know, they said the war to end all wars, or the World War. It was a war between different factions, the Habsburgs and the Rothschilds. I mean, it was just rich people, right? A rich man's war is what it was, and look how many people died for that. And they don't even know what it was about. It was a transition of systems from monarchies into, quote, democracies, what we have now, which is a corporatocracy. It's nothing to do with freedom or direct representation. We had the shooting of a Mexico homeless man. It sparked killer cops protest. Then I came across this. Someone sent me the video, and that breaking: government terrorists attack Bundy Ranch. That's the headlines. The feds are killing cattle in war with rancher. That's from WorldNet Daily. This last one, the government terrorists attacking Bundy Ranch, comes from Next News Network. Then we have this from TeaPartyTribune.com. Ruby Ridge-style standoff brewing. Armed feds prepare for showdown with Nevada cattle rancher. Wow, so if you saw the first video, then this will just kind of play into what I was saying. Cliven Bundy, whoever you pronounce his name, the cattle rancher, will lose and probably die, like I mentioned last week. Right? It's going to be a bloodbath. That's why they're going to come for your guns, or they haven't at least, is because they don't fear you. Because you don't have community, but also are you going to take on a monopoly of violence? But they're saying here, Bundy will lose and probably die. It will be in vain because few, if any, will stand with him, in parentheses, to protect his interest. And going off what I said at the end of the last video, the first part, which was, in a way, by defending him or standing with him, you're fighting globalism. But Cliven Bundy, he's protecting his own personal financial interests, which means that he doesn't like globalism, right? He doesn't like big government because big government represents the next step, which is nationalism and globalism, which we're in now. So yes, I agree with him with the fight against globalism and too much big nationalistic federal government, but I'm not willing to fight and die with this guy because he's going to stands to lose some profits because he doesn't want to pay and he can't compete with big global corporations of natural gas and stuff. I'm going to do what I mentioned in the last week's video, which is I'm going to wait and see and watch the whole thing just collapse. I'm going to avoid this whole thing as much as I possibly can because it's almost unavoidable. It will come to your neck of the woods. You don't need to grab your rifles and start heading to Nevada or Texas because it will eventually, if this goes forward like this is going, the way it's being played out, it will come to your doorstep. It probably won't be, no, I'm not really for it, or I don't really agree completely, so I'm not willing to fight. It'll be fight or die, and they'll do the same tactics that they did before. Fight or die, right? The blood of the tree of liberty must, be quenched with the blood of patriots from time to time. I mean, these are people that owned, a decent amount of wealth, mostly off the backs of someone else's time and energy. When that wealth, those profits were being infringed upon by higher taxes levied by the King of England, they felt that their liberty was being infringed upon. They didn't mind before when all those goods were coming from England and they were able to use that to sell to people and profit off all these poor people that were living in the colonies. Like the cattle rancher, you got to pay more now to keep doing what you're doing. Then you're gonna employ other people to do your work. That's what corporations do. They employ other people and rent them out for something that they cannot do. So that's why I see these militias almost as a form of employees.
Big rally, we got a lot of supporters who feel like they want to do something to show that they support our stand and that we don't stand alone. We're fighting for freedom for this country and for use of our public lands. These people are coming from all over, far and wide, mostly from our neighbors from around here, from Utah, because they're fighting the same thing we're fighting, and they're all here to just say, we've had enough. We've had enough. We're going to take our land back. We're done. It's more about control of the federal government. They want control of our land out there so they can make it into a wilderness area and they can lock us out.
Looking at that, it's pretty emotional, and it sounds, for the most part, true, but you have to remember, it's not our land. It never was our land. It was never the public's land. What is the public? What is the city of Chicago? What is the city of, Reno? It's not the people, right? It's financial interest. Those who have the most financial wealth and interest at stake have the decision-making power. They lost that. They are the old. The change in the new is energy. The new is importing beef from Brazil or Russia. So they don't need American cattle ranchers to do that anymore. That would be the new financial political system, or globalism. Well, it's not so much about control as it is about profit. See, they were able to profit off using the, quote, public's water or public's forage in order to feed their cows, which brought their costs down, sold it to people, and kept to maintain a certain amount of profit. Now, see, what they don't want to do is they don't want to have to avoid having to pay for some kind of feed or whatever the hell it is. I mean, I'm not too knowledgeable in this whole the nuts and bolts of it, but it seems to me that people they do want to use the government when it comes to businesses and like that to increase their net profits. And I'm not speaking about this man or his family, like they wouldn't help people out. I'm not saying that. I'm sure that they would. But the way that he's saying it makes it sound like it's a humanitarian, egalitarian issue. To this man and his families and other cattle ranchers' credit, farmers were usually big status. They're all about forming statehood and stuff, whereas the free grazers, as they called them, or they were called, were against forming governments. So they were actually for not forming governments a lot of times. It's kind of, but you have to acknowledge the fact that they wouldn't be able to operate there peacefully or with security unless the wars were being carried out by the federal government against the Indians. So this was definitely, you could refer to as corporatism all the way back then. Maybe that's how it was designed to be. I don't know. And now they're being kicked off that grazing land by the same entities that help provide that ability for them to profit. A similar industry, especially at that time, was the railroad expanding west. That was government taxpayer money subsidizing the building of the railroad for these railroad barons. There's just a few of them, right? And this led to big cities, sprawling cities, more government being made or created. But the owners, they would complain because they weren't getting enough protection by the troops because they were too busy clearing out other parts of the United States with the Indian Wars. And of course you got mining, gold mining, silver mining. People, make your stake. You can make your way. You can be like the rich capitalists in New York. And what the West represented, which was freedom, the ultimate form of capitalism, right? But the way I'm seeing it now, looking back, is that these people were used to inhabit that land. Whether it was the cattle ranchers, whether it was the railroad, they created these towns and these people live in these towns, and the miners all out there in the West Coast and stuff, in that area, mining. They were there to basically inhabit the land, to replace the land, and then, of course, whoever built this government was going to be profiting from all these different endeavors that they had investments in. Of course, on the backs of you, either a taxpayer or a worker, or business owner or entrepreneur. It takes me to the that show Deadwood from HBO. I look at it differently now after thinking about all this and what it represented. I looked at it as, oh, they're encroaching on our rights, but these were basically owners of businesses, whether it was newspaper, Al Swearengen's bar, and all this other stuff, gambling. They had no official government, but they were enjoying the benefits of the security that was provided with by the war between the federal government and the Indians. So they were able to profit for that. They didn't have to pay taxes, return on investment for that. So when they did, they were all resistant to forming a government. They basically because it started to encroach on their financial interests, not because they're ideological or anything. They care less. The freedom of their customers. I mean, they even make jokes about them, calling them hoopleheads, and they wish they could just take their money and rob them and dump them in the ditch instead of gambling, acting like the games aren't rigged. The government that existed there before was a bar owner, right? This the Swearengen guy, actually ran a brothel. But then new interest came in. Someone that owned gold, right? You had on one side you had this woman, Miss Garrett, whatever, who just kind of fell into owning this gold claim that was one of the biggest in the area, and then you had someone that was coming in from outside, George Hirsch, who is the type of person that pays off politicians, and you see that in the show. And of course, Al Swearengen's kind of in the middle. These smaller owners are kind of in the middle. And so they side and ally with the smaller, biggest interest, try to take on this big fish who has the government in their pockets, much like in what's going on in Nevada with whether it's oil, whether it's natural gas, or whether it's just super rich elites who don't want to have anything to do with it, but just the land itself for their own, for themselves, basically, to have a bunch of land to themselves. Something else just to think about, put it out there, it could be people behind pushing genetically modified food, i.e. livestock. So they create a shortage, say, ooh, so we got a shortage, we better provide this genetically modified beef. The thing is that there's a bigger fish here, and they're using the government, like people always do, to help their own interest, their financial interest. It'd be similar to this Swearengen hotel owner enlisting people who he profits from to do the fighting for him against the competing interests, or George Hirsch. So we're talking about the older system and then the newer system. It's pretty much the same thing. It just has grown to what it was eventually going to be. So you have these capitalists that are, like pharmaceutical companies or defense contractors. They like big government. They love them, right? Because they have a lot of money, and they can use that to lobby. They can use it for paying lots of taxes, and that helps them to skirt regulations like this. But the cattle industry and other similar ones, they're for limited government, not no government, because they need the government to be able to carry out and conduct their business and produce their profits. But they want limited government because there's more competition still in those industries. I mean, not much really, but there's still competition. So they get less in profits because, like say Merck or GlaxoSmithKline, you only have a few places that you can go that are authorized by the government because they paid them off to do that, to make it like that, to regulate the market. And I'm sure cattle ranchers don't want no government because people would be able to get into the industry more easily, and they would compete so much that it wouldn't be profitable for them to do it. So that was kind of the beginning stages of what we call modern capitalism. And the end stage, the natural evolution of it, would be no competition, a few hands, monopolies. And I'm a little surprised that these limited government capitalists haven't realized yet that the U.S. government isn't there to protect their liberty or some ideological principles. It's there to get on our back like a whore and give it up to whoever pays her the most.